Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Big welcome into the GSMC Soccer Podcast. Sad day in the world of sports. And I'm sure every sports podcast or sports show you've consumed today will include a segment like this because it really should. And there's plenty of news in the world of soccer, a big weekend to go over it. And we'll dive into all that stuff shortly. And, but of course I have to start because I think it would be remiss, especially on a soccer podcast, not to mention Kobe Bryant, who was a legendary soccer fan himself. You can see so many pictures across his history of him being involved with soccer around the world and embracing the game and finding the beauty in the game. And we saw tributes for the legendary NBA legend all over the world of soccer over the weekend. And it's really tough to talk about. And this is the first, I haven't been on this earth very long. My life really started right when Kobe Bryant was starting his NBA career. And I've never really understood why people are saddened by deaths of people they've never met, celebrities. And I remember my mother always used to tell me this story, is that she found out that she was pregnant with me and went to tell her mother in Germany. And right before she was about to tell her, the news of Princess Diana's death broke. And Princess Diana was a beloved figure for my grandmother, was a beloved figure for a lot of people. And the news of this broke before she had a chance to tell my grandmother. And she said they sat there and cried. And that even when she broke the news of my coming into this world eventually, to my grandmother, it didn't matter because they were so saddened by that moment. Now, I remember thinking when I was younger that was kind of ridiculous, frankly. That you would be so affected by a person you had never met, a person you had never known, a person you'd only seen on television, a person you'd only seen speak. You haven't even gone and seen them in person. That the birth of your child or the eventual birth of your grandchild takes little significance next to this event. But yesterday I understood. Yesterday was one of the hardest sports days of my life. And I didn't even realize how much Kobe Bryant had meant to me until it happened. Until the shocking news came down that we don't need to go over again. And that's why I wanted to dedicate this first portion of this show to Kobe Bryant, to the Mamba, to that mentality. Because why was I so affected? Why was this man I've never met, this man I've only seen on TV, this man I've heard speak? Well, it's because I grew with him. I saw his growth and development. I remember standing in a Best Buy, and the first NBA video game I'd ever played was NBA 2K10 with Kobe Bryant on the cover. Kobe Bryant in the finals. That's all you could play, the demo in the store, and I kept playing that game and really made me fall in love with basketball. I remember watching Dear Basketball when it came out, the Oscar-winning animated short made by Kobe Bryant, score done by John Williams, my favorite movie music composer ever. And I remember being moved to tears because Kobe Bryant had a dream. And he gave everything for that dream. He worked for that dream. But he did more than just say, I worked for this. He credited the dream for his work. He credited the dream for everything he's done, for the life he's lived. And so many people can connect with that. Me specifically can connect with that. Since I was 8 years old, I wanted to be a sports broadcaster. I've pursued that dream with unending passion since I was 16. It's what I've consistently done time and time again. Hours upon hours of work and dedication and travel. And Kobe Bryant, in that Dear Basketball film, and then watching the end of his career and how he handled everything, and how he started to handle his daughters, and showing that you can pursue a dream, and once you achieve it, there's something else to move on to. There's a transition. He showed us how to handle failure, how to strive for success. He made me laugh a lot of times with his comments and quotes and his actions on the sidelines. He did everything that an athlete could possibly do. And I wish I would have realized what Kobe Bryant meant to me a little bit sooner. But sometimes death has a way of showing you what you didn't realize. And it's difficult to simply describe how sad this event is. Because there have been other celebrity deaths that have saddened me. Robin Williams was a comedic idol of mine. I enjoyed about every film he made. His stand-up routines would make me laugh to my core. But Robin Williams is a little bit older. And obviously the circumstances of his death, tragic, but not like this. Kobe had everything in front of him. And he had an entire life of accomplishments behind him. It felt like we were we had potential taken away from us. It felt like we had hope. It felt like we had a future, a transition taken away from us. A legend taken away from us. In one of the most tragic ways imaginable. A crash in a helicopter in a field outside of Los Angeles. Wrap that all together, and it's the saddest day in sports. Probably one of the saddest days outside of my own family perishing or my own pets perishing of my life. But I think it's important that we recognize how special that this feeling, even this feeling of immense tragedy, is. It shows us why sports are so special. Because all around the world, we all have this connection to Kobe Bryant. Why? Why? Because he played a game. Just like music and art, it connects us in some way that's truly indescribable. It's the most beautiful part of humanity. Sports connects us in ways we couldn't even imagine. How many of us out there wrapped up a little piece of paper into a ball and shouted Kobe and tried to sink it? How many times did that happen throughout the world? How many times did that connect us? How many fathers and sons bonded by watching one man do something special and play basketball? So I think Kobe would want us to recognize after this event, although it's extremely sad, that there is some beauty in what he accomplished, and his death helps us connect in some sort of way. Helps us remember him and remember how special sports can be, how special basketball can be, how special family can be. And the most important thing Kobe left with us is the Mamba mentality, the dogged pursuit of whatever you want, working at it with undying passion and undying work ethic. And I think a lot of people are going to move on from yesterday and work a little harder. Get up a little earlier. Fight for what they want in life. Because Kobe showed us that it can be done. And Kobe has shown so many athletes and so many people that this mentality, this way of doing business, this way of going after what you want and deserve in life is beautiful, is amazing, is worth it. It's worth it. And I just wanted to take the first 10 minutes of our show because I wish I could give 24 minutes to him. And I just wanted to say thank you, Kobe. Thank you for showing us that sports can connect all of us, that work ethic above everything can give you everything you want in life. And how even after the pursuit of your dream, when that dream ends, or even if you don't accomplish that dream, that you can transition into family, into another passion, and lead another life, and lead it beautifully. Kobe Bryant, gone far too soon. We'll have soccer on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Big welcome back into the GSMC Soccer Podcast. Somber start to the show, I understand. But I could not do it. Couldn't not do it. And you understand what I'm trying to say. Had to be done. Rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. And everybody out there, just do it today. Shoot something at a trash can and yell Kobe. And just like Kobe Bryant, never, ever, ever be afraid to miss. Never be afraid to miss. Big weekend in the world of soccer. A lot of news to get to. We'll talk Bayern Munich and the Bundesliga. Some interesting news also from Eintracht Frankfurt. A little bit of a political discussion diving into it. And I want to give you some of the background being from Germany and understanding a little bit of their culture with some controversy that's going on in the Bundesliga. Also talk about the Bundesliga standings, which have shaken up a little bit. Juventus, a tough loss. We'll dive into that a little bit later. Liverpool electing not to play the FA Cup replay. Essentially, they'll play, but not really. We'll dive into that later in the show as well. But where I wanted to start is with Barcelona. It is consistently falling apart. On this show on Friday, you might have heard it Saturday morning, I said that Valencia was a real threat to Barcelona and that Valencia, honestly, I expected them to win that match. And they did. 2-0 over Barcelona, and it looked ugly for Barcelona and Quique Setién, the new manager. So they fire Valverde. 3 matches later, Barcelona looks a mess. They barely get by Ibiza in the Copa del Rey. They look really vulnerable against Valencia now, a 2-0 loss, aimless possession. Stories come out that Lionel Messi is in charge, essentially, might be even setting lineups. There's rumors circulating everywhere that Barcelona is an absolute mess, and they did this move. They fired their manager while they were tied at the top of La Liga with Real Madrid. Now, after the loss to Valencia, they are 3 points behind. And this is kind of a re-emphasization. I don't want to make it a I told you so segment, because certainly everything is still in front of Barcelona. They are highly talented. Lionel Messi, Antoine Griezmann, they can certainly turn this thing around. There's so much talent on Barcelona. I would be rather silly to count them out all the way. But this inconsistency, this change, this lack of trust for managers continues to bite teams, and it bit Barcelona in the worst way. And they are in a point of difficult recovery. While Real Madrid has trusted Zinedine Zidane, and they are flying and they are pushing. And they feel like the significant favorites in my eyes in La Liga because they have consistency. I believe in their manager. I believe in their message. And I know that they're going to play a little more as a team than Barcelona will because they have better leadership, better culture as of this moment. And Barcelona continuing to make change after change after change, so many clubs around the world continuing to make managerial changes. is difficult to recover from. It's difficult to build a culture. It's difficult to build an identity. It's difficult to build a practice schedule, a way of doing things. And to mention Kobe Bryant was all about routine and working at the same rate every day, getting better at a craft, building a culture, building a way of doing things, building a mentality. And it's hard to establish that in the middle of a season. That's why changing managers in the middle of a year, unless a guy is a complete and utter disaster, to me is silly. And Barcelona's manager had him in the round of 16 of the Champions League, and they were tied at the top of La Liga. So yeah, you make the change, and maybe this guy can bring you a little bit more fire and maybe would be a better choice of manager. I'm not sure if Setien is a better manager than Valverde. I'm not even sure if I can make that claim that they hired the wrong guy or fired the wrong guy. It's just the timing of it all. Show some patience. Let him finish out the league. You're Barcelona. You'll be competitive. You might not win the Champions League, but you're not going to win it with this new guy either. And you give that manager a chance to maybe recover and build some sort of culture, build some sort of identity. And I just really wish that would have been a more concerted effort from Barcelona to keep some sort of consistency. And I think the more we see managers get fired, the more we're going to see these things tumble out of control. We've mentioned time and time again when this happens in the MLS that it usually tumbles out of control. When it happens in any sports league around the world that's highly competitive, it tends to tumble out of control. Now, we can talk about Bayern Munich, and we will later in the show, about how their managerial change is actually working out for them. But those are special circumstances when it works out. Tyronn Lue taking over the Cleveland Cavaliers and then winning a championship. Those are special circumstances. Special sort of circumstances where the culture is poisoned, where the manager or a coach has no idea what's going on. They aren't efficient. They're making the complete wrong decisions, and the entire organization agrees that a change needs to be made. Again, Barcelona may have been in that position. I wasn't in the building. It's tough for me to say from thousands of miles away, hey, they shouldn't have done this 1,000%. My point that I want to keep emphasizing is be careful when you do this, because if you don't hire the exact right guy, or you fired a guy a little prematurely, you can derail your entire season. And it's not like Barcelona's season was up in flames when they made this firing. They still had every single goal in front of them. And I read an article where, Setien is saying, hey, we still have everything in front of us. It's one loss to Valencia, but they looked aimless. They looked out of position. They looked out of form. And yeah, everything's in front of you, but everything would have been in front of the past manager too. And when you can't handle your business against Ibiza, you need a last-second goal to sneak by a third-tier team in the Copa del Rey. It's just a difficult pill to swallow. And to me, Barcelona is at real risk of falling to third or fourth in La Liga this year if they don't start believing in this guy and believing in his culture, which is so tough to do on the fly and even tougher to do when you're not getting results, when you're not winning games. And it's just going to be a struggle, I believe, for Barcelona as we move forward. We'll see them struggle in match after match. They have a ton of talent, though. The talent may shine through, and boy, would that be special for Messi. But I think this weekend's match shows even more how special it would be if Messi were able to drag this Barcelona team to significant results, to results that make your eyes open. Champions League semifinal, for example, a Liga title, for example. If he can do that, find a way to do that with Griezmann, if he can do that at 33 years old, then that is awfully impressive. And it's something that should certainly be recognized, but I just find it hard to believe that will happen as we move forward. We'll see, though. Barcelona right now just struggling and seem to be a mess. I would like you to follow us on social media at GSMC_soccer, Facebook GSMC Soccer. Give us a like there. All those things help us out so much. On the other side of the break, little Serie A talk. Juventus with a tough loss. Is it a hiccup or is it a sign of things to come for the Serie A leaders, Juventus? That comes up on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Big welcome back into the GSMC Soccer Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Just before the break, talked about Barcelona continuing to fall apart under their new manager. Not sure they should have made the change. We'll see if Messi and the crew can find a way to save FC Barcelona. We move on to Italy. Juventus with a tough loss against Napoli, a late second goal. Gives the team in blue, Napoli, the win against Juventus, the current Serie A leaders. And we've talked about Juventus a lot on this show, and I think they're a highly talented team, and they've shown that. 5 straight wins heading into this match, but an 86-minute goal for Napoli gives them the victory. Sealed at 2-0. Ronaldo got a goal in the 90th minute. Napoli actually won possession in this game, had double the shots, same amount of shots on goal. Problem was, Inter Milan, the team that was in second behind Juventus, they could only pick up a draw over the weekend. They're within a game now, 3 points behind Juventus. Lazio, though, could be 2 points behind if they find a way to win because they're only at 20 matches played, while Juventus and Inter Milan both at 21 matches played this season. There's 2 ways you can read into this. There's 2 ways you can read into a middle-of-the-season upset against a team that's sitting in the middle of the table. I could read into this as a sign of things to come for Juventus. As a bad sign, they got outplayed by a team that is behind where they are. Napoli certainly behind where Juventus is in talent, in culture, in the standings, all those things. Or I can see this as a hiccup. And I think I'm going to choose to see this as a hiccup. There's been a lot of matches. They played 3 over the last week. Juventus did against Udinese, Parma, Roma. Then they play Napoli. It's on the road. Napoli, a fired-up home crowd. They're a team in the middle of the table. This is essentially their biggest game of the year. And you just get beat sometimes. And when I rewatched this match, didn't catch it live, but when I rewatched this match, it just felt like Juventus was kind of stalling a bit. It felt like that they weren't firing in all cylinders. And that happens over long seasons, and it happens in sports. So the way I'm going to look at this one is, this is a tough loss. This is a loss that is hard to swallow, but it's a hiccup. It's something that I think Juventus will recover from easily. I think Juventus will be the Serie A champion, especially when Inter Milan had that opportunity and they could only find a way to get a draw against Cagliari, a team that's in the middle of the table as well. So Inter Milan doesn't feel like a team that's storming up to the top of Serie A, a team that's going to pass Juventus. And I don't even think the addition potentially of Christian Eriksen will push Inter Milan over the top of Juventus, even after watching Juventus drop this match. Now, Juventus is going to have a little bit of a break here. They don't have to play until Super Bowl Sunday this weekend. I think that's time to recover. Fiorentina, the team that will be battling Juventus, that's an early morning match on Sunday, February 2nd. So they have a little more rest than they had before this match against Napoli. They'll have time to recover mentally, time to recover physically. And that's good signs for Juventus. That's a good thing for Juventus. I think they'll bounce back with a fury and show that they're still the best team in Italy. They're the team that you should favor to win the Italian championship. And when we look at 538, did the loss from Juventus really change the projections? No, it did not. Juventus still at 67% to win the league. However, the loss from Juventus did give Lazio an interesting opportunity. They're up to 14% when they sat at 3 before this weekend. Right now, top of the league, Juventus at 51 points, Inter at 48, Lazio at 46. Lazio and Inter Milan right there at 15 and 14% if Juventus continues to fall off the table. But I just don't think they're falling off the table. I think it's a hiccup. I think it's a small road bump. I think that they probably should have gotten a draw out of this match on the road and we wouldn't be freaking out at all. I think it's time to remain calm about Juventus. They have Cristiano Ronaldo. It's a guy that's going to be consistent throughout the year. Now, how will they perform when the Champions League starts to get in the mix? Can Inter Milan and Lazio hang around? Maybe something happens in the Champions League. Maybe there's some bad injury luck. Knock on wood, you never cheer for that, but you never know. Maybe. There's certainly a chance that Inter and Lazio can end this run of dominance in Italy for Juventus. But to me, they're the best team. To me, this was a hiccup. They were a team that had won 5 straight, plus before that match against Napoli. I'm going to believe in Juventus. I think that's where the smart money is. I think Juventus with Cristiano Ronaldo, certainly the most talented team in Italy, and I think it'll still all work out for the defending Italian champions. I know that's not a bold prediction for me whatsoever to say Juventus is going to win Serie A, but I just don't see Inter Milan or Lazio closing that gap, even if Inter were able to find a way to add Christian Eriksen or another name to the roster before the end of the season. Don't overreact to Juventus' loss this weekend. Should we overreact to Liverpool? They had a bad draw against a third league side, Shrewsbury, in the FA Cup. They will have to play a replay. Some interesting quotes from Jurgen Klopp and a decision that many will be not okay with that I am perfectly fine the Liverpool manager doing. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Big welcome back into the GSMC Soccer Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Just talked Juventus before the break. Kobe Bryant obviously passing away. It's sad news to hear. Barcelona falling apart. Talk Bayern Munich, Eintracht Frankfurt a little bit later in the show. Bayern with a dominant showing. But where I wanted to go with this segment, Liverpool, a bad draw. They will be forced to play a replay in the FA Cup. Obviously, the FA Cup format, if you draw, you have to play a replay instead of doing a penalty kick shootout or playing extra time in that match. And what Jurgen Klopp has decided to do, it was a bad draw from Liverpool, but it's a midweek game in a tournament that they've kind of admitted they don't really care about in the FA Cup. Their fans are not sure they really care about. They're worried more about an undefeated season in the Premier League. They're worried way more about trying to get back-to-back Champions League titles. So I'm not going to read too much into the bad draw. Obviously, it's not perfect, and I don't think Liverpool is proud of it whatsoever, but it's something that I'm certainly not going to read into, especially when Liverpool has said they will not play the replay, essentially. It's going to be 0 first-team players, not even first-team rotation players, only younger Liverpool players, and the under-23 Liverpool manager will be handed the keys in the managerial role for the FA Cup replay. So they're waving the white flag. They still might win the match. And I mean, their young players are talented enough to possibly win this match against a third-tier side. But Jurgen Klopp isn't even going to manage the match because it comes in a time where they wanted to take a break. It comes during a rest period for the Premier League and for Liverpool themselves. And they've got a lot more goals in front of them than the FA Cup. Now, people are going to be upset with this decision. People aren't going to like it. People are going to want to wave their arms around and scream at the top of their lungs that this is going against the competitive nature of sports and you should try to win every single trophy and you should try to win every single match. And I see their point. I understand that. And I understand why you would want Liverpool to try to win this FA Cup replay. But to me, it's just the fault of the FA Cup. Why on earth are we playing a replay in a cup already in a league with the most matches, the most consistent amount of matches, the roughest schedule? Why on earth would Liverpool do this, right? They've already played the Carabao Cup. You've already made them participate in the FA Cup to begin with, which is a tournament that, great, you can win the FA Cup. It's a cool trophy. You win a trophy. But we understand this thing's about winning the Premier League. This thing's about winning the Champions League. And the FA Cup is a nice trophy, and it's a trophy that can save face if you're a team that doesn't win the Premier League or doesn't compete well in the Champions League. Hey, we won the FA Cup. Cool, right? Liverpool's not into that at all. And I'm 100% behind the decision of Jurgen Klopp not to play a single player that matters in this FA Cup replay. Because we saw Ole Gunnar Solskjaer make this mistake in Manchester United's FA Cup replay just before the Liverpool match. So Manchester United, decently competitive against Liverpool. We saw the loss against Liverpool translate into a bad loss for Manchester United. We talked about that on our last podcast. Now, do you know what happened in that FA Cup replay? Well, they sub in Marcus Rashford, one of their key attacking players, one of the players that if he would have played, Manchester United might have been able to get a draw or even upset Liverpool in that match because they certainly had their opportunities. And how the story would be different for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Manchester United if they would have had Marcus Rashford for that match against Liverpool. Everything would be different for them. One, there would be no talks of firing the manager. There would be no talks that Manchester United is miles behind. There wouldn't be fans leaving the stadium with 6 minutes left at Old Trafford, which is unheard of. But no, you choose to play Marcus Rashford in an FA Cup replay, and he gets hurt. And it's going to hurt your attacking front. You're going to fall in the Premier League, and it really hurts your chances in all the places that matter. So if you're Liverpool, you see that example of an opponent who was brought down a whole notch by playing a player they probably shouldn't have played in an FA Cup replay before they played you. If you're going to Klopp, I'm not going to go play my guys in an FA Cup replay. I refuse to do that. It's not even the FA Cup final. Right? It just, I completely understand this decision, and I'm 1,000% behind it. The FA Cup is cool. The FA Cup is a nice trophy. We can smile at it. It's great. But not when you have everything on the table. Not when you have a Champions League to win. Not when you have a Premier League to go out and win. You have guys you need to rest. Guys need that type of rest. You want to make sure you're healthy, focused on the real goals at hand. And I'm sorry, FA Cup, you're just not one of them. Because nobody will remember this season anymore if Liverpool wins the Premier League, wins the Champions League, and wins the FA Cup. But you will remember this season if they try in the FA Cup and that loses them the Champions League. Or that loses them the undefeated season in the Premier League. It's just about establishing what's important to you. And once something crosses a certain line, saying, no, we're not going to do that. So people around English soccer, people around the Premier League can scream and shout about this and saying, how on earth does he not even manage it? It's such disrespect to this tournament. I don't think it's disrespect to the tournament. I think it's disrespect to the replay aspect of it. I just don't think that that should exist anymore. I think that if the match is tied, you don't even need to play extra time, because I understand you don't want guys playing extra time in the middle of the week when they just had a match on Sunday and have another match on Saturday. And Lord forbid if they have something international coming up. I don't play the replay. Just have a penalty kick shootout, and if Shrewsbury upsets Liverpool, it's a great story. And if Liverpool beats Shrewsbury, so what, right? At least they played to a draw. But we have to go play a whole nother match just because we want to flip who's at home and who's on the road? I don't understand it at all from the FA Cup. And I wish they would change it because, one, you could allow teams like Liverpool to pay more respect to the tournament. Because if you're the FA Cup, if you're the English Football Federation, you're like, this is kind of disrespectful. This big tournament we have, this historic tournament, this tournament that has so many great storylines, that's famous across the world, that the manager's not even going to show up to manage it. I mean, he showed up for the first match, but just not the replay. So if you want it to feel like this tournament is more respected, don't have the replay. Just finish the match when you play it. Don't play the replay. And I'll actually take this, we play FIFA franchises and all those things. When I'm the manager of a FIFA franchise and there's an FA Cup replay, not playing any of my starters unless I'm a lower tier team, right? Because it matters for Shrewsbury. It matters for Aston Villa, who's in the championship. It matters for Swansea City. It matters for Stoke City. It matters for teams in the middle of the table. It matters for Norwich City just to save face before they're relegated this season. But it doesn't matter for Liverpool. It doesn't matter for Manchester City. It doesn't matter for Manchester United. It's just a bonus. It's just a added thing. It's an elective class that you don't really need. It's astrology on Fridays. It's just not something you need to show up to if you need to study for another test, right? So I have this astronomy, not astrology. I didn't take astrology in college. That would be probably a poor class selection, but an astronomy class, right? There's an astronomy class on Fridays. Let's say I have an exam on, let's say the astrology class is on astronomy. I keep saying astrology. Let's say the astronomy class is on Thursday nights, right? You look at the stars. It's a great class. You meet a couple buddies. There's no tests or anything, but you have an exam on Friday morning in your physics class, and you need this physics class to graduate on time. And you need to study that night. You could go ahead and skip the astronomy class. It's okay. Now, we're not advocating skipping classes, and yes, you're showing a little disrespect to the astronomy class, but here's the bottom line. One's an astronomy class, one's a physics class. You get the weight of these things. There's no reason to play the FA Cup replay whatsoever if you're Liverpool. And I wouldn't be ashamed at all if I'm a Liverpool fan. And not at all. Good. Go for the Champions League. Go for the invincible season. Those things certainly matter more. Love the move from Jurgen Klopp. It takes a lot of guts to do something like that. It takes a lot of backing from your organization. Liverpool trusting their manager. See, we continue to talk about the same things because the same things matter in all sports and especially in soccer. Bayern Munich, they're starting to really matter in the Bundesliga. I told you this might happen, and they have started to really climb the table, and the entire Bundesliga is shaking in their boots that the defending German champions will win their 8th straight German title. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Big welcome back into the GSMC Soccer Podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Moore. Bayern Munich. Oh boy. Hold on to your seats. They are coming. 5-0 win against Schalke over the weekend for Bayern Munich. And Schalke, a team, ladies and gentlemen, 33 points. They were only 6 points clear of Bayern Munich. They had a chance to pass Bayern Munich with a victory or tie them with a victory in the league. And they get destroyed 5-0 at Allianz Arena, meaning Bayern Munich, since the Hinrunde, the second half of the Bundesliga season started, they have won games a combined 9-0 against Hertha Berlin, who felt like they were back on track, and Schalke is one of the better teams and organizations and clubs in the league. Brutal if you're the rest of the Bundesliga. Leipzig was so nervous. They weren't nervous from this because they didn't know the result was coming, but Leipzig couldn't take care of business against Frankfurt, who Frankfurt in the middle of the table of the Bundesliga right now. They get a win against the leaders, meaning Bayern now just a point behind RB Leipzig. And we talked about this on the show that I felt like Bayern had finally come together as a team under Hansi Flick. This is actually one of those managerial moves I'm okay with, especially with some of the embarrassing performances that Kovac put out on the table, and Bayern Munich being third or fourth in the Bundesliga is an embarrassment, and it's really tough to watch. And they had to make the change. They did make the change. And Hansi Flick, a guy from Jupp Heynckes, who was the coach of this Bayern team the last time they were dominant on the world stage when they won the treble, the Champions League, the DFB Pokal, and the Bundesliga. He was the manager, and Hansi Flick was a mentee of him. Jupp Heynckes says Hansi Flick is a smart manager, can bring guys together, And it feels like Bayern Munich believe in their manager, they believe in themselves, and the results are starting to show. 11-0 over the last 3 matches. If you go back to the last 5 matches, check this out. 20-2 is the difference in scoreline for Bayern Munich over the last 5 matches. That is dominance. Dominance. And then if you go back to the last Champions League match, they won 3-1 against Tottenham Hotspur. I mean, this has just been an absolute run of dominance from Bayern Munich since their loss against Borussia Mönchengladbach way back when, a few matches ago. And it's scary to see if you're the rest of the Bundesliga. So we take a look at 538 and their projections for the Bundesliga. Bayern Munich now the significant favorites in the Bundesliga, which is surprising for a team that's 1 point back, but 538 understands how this league works, how talented Bayern Munich is. They are 76% chance to win the Bundesliga now, despite being in second place currently. And if you're Leipzig, you just can't drop any points like they did to Frankfurt. We talked about what would keep Bayern Munich from winning the title. I said, well, it's Leipzig winning every game other than the match against Bayern and just holding on for dear life to the title, because Bayern's going to start to destroy these mid-tier to lower-tier teams in the Bundesliga. And Schalke's not even a mid-tier team. They're an upper-tier team in the Bundesliga, and Bayern Munich embarrassed them. And this is just going to keep happening because Bayern Munich, once it clicks for them, they are deadly. They are dangerous. I think they believe in their manager. I think they believe in what he's doing. This might carry over to the Champions League because when you look at 538, Bayern Munich actually has enough talent that 538 thinks they're right there with Liverpool with a chance to win the Champions League. This could become a season of real glory for Bayern Munich after the horrendous start, after a 5-1 loss to Eintracht Frankfurt. It could become a season of real glory for Bayern Munich. They have right now the hottest striker in the world in Robert Lewandowski. He scored in 9 consecutive Bundesliga matches. Thomas Müller in form on the right side. And here's what's really scary about Bayern Munich is, when I'm watching the match, because I was at work and then I came home and had to turn the match on. I'd seen the final score. I was like 5-0, and I'm expecting to turn this match on and Bayern just to be crisp, Bayern to be ready to go, Bayern just to obliterate Schalke. And Bayern looked rough. They looked a little rusty to start. And despite that, they're playing so well as a unit. They believe in their managers. They believe in themselves. It's an attitude of positivity that even though they were rough on their first touch early in that match, they continued pounding. They got a goal, and then it opened up for them, and they just poured it in. And when Bayern gets on the front foot and you start to try to counter Bayern, you start to match blow for blow, unless you're Liverpool, unless you're Real Madrid, unless you're Manchester City, Bayern will overwhelm you. And especially if your team's in the Bundesliga. And that's exactly what happened to Schalke. And I am really worried about the rest of the Bundesliga and how they'll respond and how they'll battle Bayern Munich, because it could be rough. They've got Mainz, Hoffenheim before they battle Leipzig. There's a real chance, and I do believe that Bayern will be in first place potentially by the time they see Leipzig. That Hoffenheim match is a Pokal match in the middle of the week on February 5th. So I expect them to beat Mainz probably 4-5-0 this weekend, unless they overlook Mainz. It's on the road, but Bayern will probably pour it on in that match. And then they'll face Leipzig next in the Bundesliga, and that's Leipzig's real last chance. If they fall in that one, then it'll be Bayern Munich the whole way to the end, because then they've got Köln, who's getting beat left and right, Paderborn. That's an easy win for Bayern Munich, and then Bayern moves into the Champions League before they play Hoffenheim, Augsburg, Union Berlin, Frankfurt, who seems to be a challenge for everybody this year, but they're still middle table of the team. Dortmund, a little bit of a challenge, and you just look down this schedule, and you're just not sure who's going to beat Bayern Munich if they're going to play like they did against Schalke, even though they were a little bit rusty. That's what's scary, is they can be at 90% of their game and still be 100%, 110% better than a lot of the Bundesliga. That's why they've won 7 straight championships. I mean, this is not an exaggeration. This is why the projection models and systems have them as the favorite, had them as the favorite even when they were 4 points behind, 6 points behind RB Leipzig at the top of this league. They're dominant, and they are scary. And the rest of Europe should be worried too, because if Hansi Flick has tapped in to the same attitude and culture that Jupp Heynckes had with this team when they ran through the Champions League, when they won a Champions League title against Borussia Dortmund, If they've tapped into that, then they might take the Champions League. They might take the German title. They look dangerous. They look really dangerous, and I think they're a really talented bunch. And if Hansi Flick has figured this out, boy, oh boy, Bayern Munich, going to be a lot of fun to watch down the stretch. Tough weekend for Eintracht Frankfurt. They found out that one of their old presidents had ties to the Nazi community. That is an interesting story in the world of soccer, and I want to dive into really the importance of the move from Eintracht Frankfurt to strip him of all honors and why that matters so much in the country of Germany. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. You're listening to the GSMC Soccer Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Bayern Munich, not at the top of the Bundesliga, but they feel like it after a 5-0 win against Schalke. Eintracht Frankfurt is what made me really worried about Bayern Munich when they had a 5-1 victory earlier this year. Well, some bad news for Eintracht Frankfurt fans. One of their honorary presidents who passed away many years ago was found out to have Nazi ties and was a extreme Nazi sympathizer in his time as a player and in his time during, obviously, World War II. You know the years, 33 to 45. Not even going to mention his name here. You can look up the story, Eintracht Frankfurt, Nazi president, if you want to read all about it, his background and things like that, because honestly, no place for people like that, people with those ties, people with that history on this show. But I wanted to talk about it for this reason. One, it's soccer connected. Two, I have a real understanding of how sensitive of an issue this is for the German people. It's unfortunately still an American stereotype that Germany sympathizes with and still has Nazi connections and still has those beliefs of what the National Socialist Party believed and convinced Germany to follow for a 12-year period. I'm here to tell you that's the exact opposite of the truth. In fact, I think Nazism and that belief and that ideal system is more prevalent in so many other countries than it is in Germany. And that's because of how much the Germans regret that mistake. It is drilled into the brains of German children in schools how awful the Holocaust was. They have a whole year, even 2 years in some schools, of Holocaust classes. Like, do you know how you took 3 months in your social studies class? Probably 3 months in middle school, probably 3 months maybe in high school, maybe again in college you learned about the Holocaust. Yeah, German kids take a whole year, 1 year, and some even 2. And it's not this happened. It is, we allowed this to happen in our country. We can never allow it to happen again. And here's why we can't allow it to happen again. Because it was so horrible. It was so unbelievably disgusting what happened. And that's why you see investigations like Eintracht Frankfurt done, because they didn't have to do this. They didn't have to investigate into this when they heard these claims. The man had passed away over 20 years ago. You could have left it alone, could have let bygones be bygones. But the German culture, the German society, the German government, the German people are so interested and so dedicated of knocking away this horrible, horrible time in German history, this horrible, horrible German regime that has buried the reputation of the German identity, of what it means to be a German for decades. And this is why it's so important that they go after this, that they strip him of all honors, that they recognize what he was move on from it and disconnect themselves from who he was and what his involvement was with Eintracht Frankfurt. And this really is a story that's across the Bundesliga. There's a reason I really love FC Bayern Munich. I picked them when I was 6 years old as my favorite team of the Bundesliga because they were my grandpa's favorite team and because the rest of my family didn't like them. And I just felt connected to them. And I've always enjoyed watching Bayern Munich play. And they're just a team that I've always enjoyed. And they've had some of my favorite players of all time, and Bastian Schweinsteiger, Philipp Lahm. Lukas Podolski, even for a while, made some appearances with FC Bayern Munich. But more than that, when you dive into FC Bayern Munich's history, they were one of the staunchest clubs that defended Judaism and the Jewish people's presence in Germany. So much so that they were referred to as the Juden Club, the club for Jews, by Germans that were against the Jewish people. Right? So this connection to Bayern Munich and their embracement of their understanding that even back in 1940, what the right thing to do was, makes me even more connected to them. And just another story to reflect on how important this is to the German people, that they aren't remembered for the takeover of a political party that many after the fact admitted that they did not 100% agree with, that they were angry from the past war, that they allowed the economic drought, the economic downturn get to them. It's 1954. 1954. So for those of you that don't know the story, after World War II, obviously there were no World Cups during World War II or during those tumultuous times, 0 FIFA World Cups. They picked the World Cup back up in 1950, and Germany were banned from the tournament. Shamed. Cast out. And the German people went through a difficult and tragic 9-year rebuild of their country, which had been destroyed, demolished, both morally and their buildings and their people. And so many people died. And so much changed. And so much had to be rebuilt. And they were so shamed by what they had done that the German flag was not proudly flown. And my grandpa tells me this story with his time in Germany. He said, nobody flew a German flag. We weren't proud to be Germans. We were just trying to live. We were trying to go day by day. It's like nobody really was proud to be a German. This wasn't something that we were proud to be. We were ashamed to be it almost. And we had to rebuild the rubble of the war. We had to rebuild who we are. We had to rebuild our identity. And that thing was so tragic and so influential, that 9-year period, that in 1954, the Germans were allowed back in the World Cup. And obviously, they still had a bad reputation throughout the world. They still do now, in some circles, although Germany, I think, has been at the front of liberal causes, in the front of economic leadership, et cetera, around the world. But they were, ashamed heading into that tournament to be a German. And they played Hungary. And Hungary at the time, for those of you that don't remember, which I think probably 90% of our listeners don't remember 1954, mostly because you probably weren't alive. But 1954, the Hungarians were the most dominant soccer team on earth. They were destroying everybody, 8-1, 8-3. 6-2. Hungary was dominant. And going into that World Cup final in 1954, the world said there is no way this scrappy team of Germans, coming from a country essentially still in rubble, a country that's not even proud enough to fly a flag of their own, there's no way they're going to beat this soccer machine from Hungary. And my grandpa tells the story of listening to the match on radio, and so many stories of Germans huddling around the one TV that was in their village in black and white. And they watched their German team pull the miracle at Bern. And they won 4-2. And the Germans in 1954 were world champions. My grandpa tells the story that for the first time in his life, it felt like he could fly the German flag proudly. And everybody felt like German again. And they did this for Germany. And they felt connected. And soccer uplifted the country from this great tragedy, from the rubble of World War II. And it was a special moment in German history. And it was special because they had regretted the mistakes of the war. It was special because soccer gave them that connection back into the world, made them feel a part of the world stage, that they were ready to do things right, that they were ready to play soccer right, to build teams right, to build countries right. And they could fly the German flag proudly because they had accomplished something new. They had done something together. They had done something with German work ethic and initiative. That's what this means to Germany. That's what soccer means to Germany. And that is why it's so crucial that all these German clubs, when they find somebody like Eintracht Frankfurt did that had extreme ties to the Nazi Party, to erase their memory, to disgrace them. It's crucial in Germany because it's crucial to remember that soccer is supposed to be about forgetting what happened between 1933 and 1945, not embracing it, not in any way possible. And that's why I think it was extremely important what Eintracht Frankfurt did with its investigation and with the actions they took after the investigation, stripping him of all honors, stripping him of everything, even 20, 30 years after this man's death. Because it's still important to Germans today that they are remembered for 1954, not 1945. And that's where we'll end this show. It was a fun one, sad one too. Rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. That's important to remember today. Remember, never be afraid to miss. Never. Keep shooting. Keep trying. Keep working. That's what Kobe would want. It's what I think anybody could ask for in life and all those great things. I'm Lukas Moore. Give us a follow on Twitter at GSMC_soccer, the Facebook page, GSMC Soccer. Give it a like, and we'll see you next time. Remember to check out all the podcasts on the GSMC Podcast Network. This has been the GSMC Soccer Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And for the last time, we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.